أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Fear is a very powerful motivator. I once asked a class that I was lecturing, I asked them, what do you think? What's the best way of getting other people to do what you want them to do? And 100% of the class replied that if you threaten some sort of punishment or repercussions, people are most likely to do what you want them to do. And I think if I look at myself, my own family, my friends, people at work, I think it's very difficult to debate the fact that people jump, they obey orders when they're afraid of negative consequences. So there's the fear, that drives, that shapes, and that makes people act in accordance to the law. If you take fear away, I wonder if there'll be any real respect for the law. But it's okay to have fear. Fear of punishment is a good deterrent, maybe. But for me, as a student of oppression and a student of and a seeker of emancipation, a person interested in the emancipation of humanity, I notice how fear has been instrumentalized or leveraged by the power elite. So what has happened is that fear is no longer just a natural phenomenon. It is a carefully leveraged phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that people actually now are exposed to, that forces them to toe the line. And that's a different type of fear. Many years ago when the internet came out, there was no people were sharing their own material, and the internet was quite a safe place. And then I just recall at some point in time the internet became a hotspot for viruses. It became a place where your PC could be infected, and then suddenly the need for an antivirus came about. Now the same with society. I remember a time when the world was a safe place, when you could walk out into the street at any time of the night or day, go to the shop, the kids would play in the street. And then just suddenly one day I realized that it's very difficult to do that now. Kids can't ride on their bikes. There's a level of criminality and lawlessness that has taken over. Even when you buy stuff now on Gumtree or eBay or whatever, there's always the fear of being swindled or being conned by some internet con artist. So it shapes the way you behave. The problem of crime, of theft, of burglary, the problem of viruses on the internet, the problem of catching diseases. It now drives our behavior in terms of seeking preventative help or curative help. So now we have to seek insurance, we have to go and invest more and more into security. We are fearful of our own health, and so we have to spend more on medical aid and more on doctors. And our salary, if you look at your salary, if I look at the average salary, then people are spending probably, I could estimate half of their salary on just not being afraid of not, facing a burglary and not having insurance in place, or getting seriously ill and not having medical aid cover in place, hospital cover in place, or driving your car and having your car stolen without having car insurance in place, or not having a security company that monitors your alarm system. So we are spending about half of what we should be enjoying on addressing our fears. And that's for the middle class. I'm talking about the middle class now. When it comes to the poorer classes, and in South Africa there are many, many people who are living in sub-economic conditions and in conditions of poverty and squalor, where the sewage is running into their back doors every day, where in summertime their houses burn down in the dry weather, and in winter their houses are flooded in the wet rainy season, where they can't buy anything of value because it gets stolen out when they go to work. All the members of the family are at work, and there's no way of securing your valuables in a tin shack. So there's the physical fear of crime, of being mugged, of women being assaulted sexually, and there's the fear of burglaries and crime, etc. So it's a big money-making opportunity. In fact, it is used as a money-making opportunity. In South Africa we had a very safe, relatively safe societies, and the liberalizing of society, the liberalizing of the criminal justice system, the loss of moral force in society led to the increased crime rate. And if you look at the people who are pushing the liberalizing agenda, the agenda to liberalize the criminal justice system, the schooling system, the level of moral restraint that people place on themselves, then those are the people that are actually benefiting when there is a collapse of security within that society. So now that the small businesses can no longer afford to function in the center of Cape Town or in the public spheres, they are forced to rent space in the private spaces, in the big malls, where there is a good amount of security and safety, which the mall obviously pays for and charges a premium for when I want to open my small shop in there. So the fear of crime, the fear of loss, the fear of sickness are all carefully leveraged by the power elite. And it's not a new thing. I mean, fear goes back many centuries, in fact, to ancient times. People have always been fearful of wild animals, of bad weather, of other forms of natural disasters. But in our times, it has reached epic and epidemic proportions. I'm not the one saying so. I'll show you a few researchers that I have here. Let me just quickly close all these other. I've this one here. Anxiety is the first experience of our freedom as a freedom from things and other people. It is a freedom to begin to become myself. Anxiety is perhaps the philosophical mood par excellence. It is the experience of detachment from things. Okay, we're speaking about anxiety here. What we have here is article by Simon Critchley. Just got it on the internet, and but importantly, it summarizes the work of one of the most important Western philosophers, Heidegger. And a lot of Western thinking is influenced by Heidegger. A lot of the psyche Western psyche is influenced by the existentialist philosophy of people like Heidegger. Let's just look at another one. There's also another. Let's look at this one. This one is a summary of the work of Jean-Paul Sartre, very big philosopher, also influential philosopher. Contemporary, not contemporary, I think going back to the 70s. Very influential over the contemporary Western psyche and understanding, sort of a postmodern type thinker. And let me just take out something that is indicative of this type of fear. In the philosophy of Sartre, there is an accord between the feeling of anxiety and freedom. Right? So once again, that anxiety that I'm referring to is very much ingrained and highlighted in modern society, where there are less cultural norms, like entrenched norms, where freedom or the lack of any restriction is much more highlighted. The lack of barriers, the lack of restrictions. Let's just look at some other writers also. Now this is from the work of Kierkegaard, also very influential Western. The deeper the anxiety, the greater the man. Kierkegaard proactively says greater meaning something like more dignified, because of the author. So Kierkegaard also made a big deal of the anxiety experienced in the modern condition. Another one here. Foucault, probably one of the most cited Western philosophers at universities. Postmodern philosopher. Also wrote extensively about the state of anxiety in Western society. In particular, this work covers the idea of mental illness, and how mental illness is highlighted or increased in the postmodern boundaryless or pluralist or anti-normative society, where norms and traditions are discarded. So the point I'm trying to make is that fear is part of the human condition. We experience a lot of fear and anxiety, whether it is driving on the road and being anxious about all those bad drivers out there, or sleeping at night and wondering whether you are safe in your bed, or walking around being told that COVID is everywhere and you've got to wear 1 or 2 or 3 masks and get injected to keep yourself safe. So it's part of our lives. It's part of being human, but as I'm saying, it is also a feature of being human that has become leveraged or harnessed by the global or the power elite within all our societies. This series, we call it Quranic Reflections. And the purpose of this discussion is to allow the Quran to speak and to offer the antidote or the counter to these massive social challenges that we face. If fear and anxiety have been turned into a tool of enslavement, which I believe it has been turned into a tool of forcing your and my behavior to subscribe to a particular set of norms, which have no relation to our cultural, historical norms. These are norms that are purely norms that are in place and intact just to serve the system of enriching the elite and empowering the elite further. So these norms such as individualism, they purely serve the needs, an absence of collective action or collectivism, or people acting in unison, or people acting in solidarity. Those are not norms promoted by the power elite. What they promote is singular action, man alone, the solitary man, the solitary woman, and the loss and abandonment of historical, cultural norms and values. So they want us to tune into their norms and tune out of the norms that are historically healthy and wholesome. What is the Quran's response to this? If something is so important, if you believe in a book and you believe that book is a divine book and it is in tune with human nature, and that it is in tune with the problems that human beings face, and with the scourges of elitism and enslavement of humanity, then I'm sure you have to find something in that book that gives you the power to undo the problem. And I do believe I see it in the book. As a very, very first start, when the Quran speaks about people, or people who accept it, the Quran addresses various people. If you open the Quran, if you care to take the time one day, you'll notice that the Quran specifies the person that it addresses. So at numerous occasions, the Quran will address not all of humanity. Sometimes it will address all of humanity, and then it will say, listen, all of humanity, listen up, all of humanity. Ya ayyuhan nas in Arabic. Listen up, all of humanity. But many times the Quran doesn't speak to humanity in general. It only speaks to the subsection of humanity that adopted, endorsed, or affirmed the Quran, that actually acknowledges the Quran as the true word of God and the expression of ultimate truth. When it does that, it then calls not on all humanity, it then calls on, O you who are secure. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. It's a very interesting word that is used. O you who are secure. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu is often referred to as O you who believe. But the word aman in Arabic is a very complex word. It means more than believe. It means affirm, but it also means to be secure. For example, insurance in Arabic is also comes from the word amn. State security also comes from the same word amn. We amanu, the amanu part. So in Arabic, if you want to refer to the state security, you talk about dawlatul amni dawla, the security of the state. When you talk about insurance, short-term insurance, you talk about ta'meen. It's also related to So when the Quran addresses those who embrace or affirm or endorse the Quran, it refers to them as, O you who are secure. Do you see the link here? That then what it obviously means, there's a link obviously here between being secure as opposed to you who are afraid, you who are anxious. So the Quran then draws a distinction between those who affirm the book are called the secure ones, or the ones with peace of mind. The rest are regarded as the anxious people, people who are living in anxiety. So there's a clear link here. There's a clear link here. And as a endorser of the Quran, I can tell you that the book offers many, many, many opportunities or many counters to the fear mongering that we experience in the world. There's fear mongering all around us, every time. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you are confronted with fear mongering. When you go to bed at night, you're confronted with fear mongering. And the Quran addresses those who adopt the Quran, who adopt the directives contained in the Quran, as those with peace of mind, those who are secure. Now, I'll explain to you why. I've thought earlier, I've made a few notes, and I made a list of the things that I think I'm afraid of, or I'm anxious about, and that I think other people around me are anxious about. And let me just show you a few of those things. I think my thought is that people who are living in the most desperate conditions are afraid of very physical things. They're afraid of being mugged when they come home 12 o'clock from a late night shift. They're afraid of driving in a dangerous taxi that speeds on the freeways and where people have a very much bigger chance of dying. They're afraid of catching ill, getting sick. You know, last year, a whole lot of children died in South Africa by falling into a pit toilet. And a pit toilet is a poo well. It's a well of poo and urine. And a number of children at schools where poo wells or pits are used fell into that. The fear that the people who are living in the most desperate conditions experience are very, very physical, real fears. The fear of being mugged, of being assaulted, of being robbed, of being killed on the roads, those are the very real fears. That you must now add the other fears of not being able to provide for their families, coming home without any income for the day. So I've thought that is the most fundamental type of fear, and I doubt that the middle class in South Africa, or in India for that matter, or in America, where the 90% or 70% of you guys are middle class, or Europe, I don't think you face the type of physical fear that people in some third world countries face, which explains why those people are prepared to get onto boats and cross the dangerous ocean, the dangerous waters of the Mediterranean and wherever else, and cross deserts and cross jungles to escape that physical insecurity that they face. But what you and I, who live in reasonably comfortable, materially provided conditions, experience is the fear of loss. And that's the second fear I want to talk about. You know, you might not be so afraid of being mugged or getting caught up in an accident in an unsafe vehicle driving at high speed at night, or suffering from disease, or having their child drown in a pit of sewage, feces, water. But what we're afraid of is loss of income, loss of job, maybe loss of health, maybe loss of social standing, excommunication, maybe socially being alienated. And that is the type of anxiety that I think Foucault and Heidegger and Sartre and Kierkegaard and all these big gun Western philosophers were referring to, is the type of anxiety that we face is more that in that line. But not really. I think it's the next one that I want to actually refer to more. First of all, there's this loss, the fear due to encountering or experiencing the unknown. That's the other type of fear that I've identified, and that I think is purely an inability to cope, an inability to make sense, an inability to explain. No one wants to be in a situation where they feel powerless, where they don't know how to deal with a challenge. And the unknown is a fear that's very real. That's the third type of fear that I've identified. And then the final fear that is really now dealing with the Western postmodern or the modern condition, more the postmodern condition, is in a time of Western existentialism, where the citizens of the West, of Western society, and I'm referring here to the West, whether the West is in South Africa or the West is manifested in India by the middle classes of the new elite of Delhi, or the new elite of Soweto in South Africa, or the new elite of Cape Town, the Muslim elite or the non-Muslim or any elite, the Arab elite, the Western European elite, is what I think is a fear of not being recognized. The fear of becoming invisible, disappearing into the background. That's the fourth type of fear. It's the type of fear, I think, that people who are no longer fearful of losing their money or being mugged or getting sick, it's the type of fear that those people experience, is the fear of not amounting or counting for anything. And it's very real. I don't think I'm onto nothing here. I think that is very real. I think that is the driving force behind the new victim movement in the West. The LGBT victim movement, the Black Lives Matter victim movement, the Muslim minority victim movement. And I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a Muslim victim. I'm not a victim. I refuse to be categorized as a victim. A victimhood has become a badge of honor. Victimhood has become a ticket to claiming heroic status in society. And that is what people replace their feeling of being nothing, of having no purpose. The victimhood offers them purpose. It offers them a back door to being a hero. And I do believe that is the fourth type of victimhood that is very, very much exploited by those who want to break up societies and divide people, and thus invent different races and invent different religious groups and invent different types of cuisine preferences, and different sexual preferences, and invent all these different ways of turning people into victim categories. So this is what I think are the different types of fear that are being imposed on us. And some of them are not imposed on us. At the very primary level, these are imposed on us because of the economic inequalities and because of the dispossession and the theft of wealth by the power elite from the poor. And that results in those physical desperation that exists. The sense of loss here is because of the power elite's control over the levers of the economy, over the finances of society, over the money supply, over the politicians. They own the politicians, and they can basically leverage that power to put you out of a job or put you out of money. The unknown is basically the disgusting state of the education system and people being passed out at the end of their schooling career being more ignorant than they would have been if they had never gone to school, or exiting university more ignorant than had they never gone to university. So it is the physical imposition of ignorance on society and the fear that comes with that ignorance. So we don't know how to deal with other people because we don't know those people, and we're not taught the history of those people, and we come out of our educational institutions ignorant, unable and unwilling to function in society. So let me take the discussion a bit further. How does the Quran respond to this leveraging of fear, this use of fear by the power elite to engineer your oppression and my oppression, to keep us in check, to prevent us from rising up, to prevent us from freeing ourselves from the shackles of fear? I'm going to go through a few verses from the Quran that amazingly changes your perspective. Now, first of all, you should know the Quran is not a book that changes anything. The Quran is a set of guidelines. It's like a blueprint. It's a formula. It's a recipe. It's an algorithm which it needs to be executed. It needs to be enforced. It needs to be carried out. The Quran written down and put down on the table has got absolutely no power, no value. The power of this book only becomes evident or manifest when it is taken up by an agent. When a human agent opens the book and decides to execute the directives in the book, then that book assumes power. Unfortunately, though, there are very few or no agents prepared to execute the directives in this book. Many people claim to have it. The Muslims open it and then they sing out of it, and they enjoy it for entertainment, and they even have competitions who can sing the most beautiful from the book. But nobody that I know of, or very few at least, in a systematic way, looks at the directives in the book, because it's simple. The directives are not subject to interpretation. I can give you an example. In the book, it says here that levying of exorbitant interest, multiplying the return payment over and over, does that need to be outlawed? That is outlawed in the book. In the book, it says that all sexual interactions or relationships should take place within a agreed upon consensual relationship with due regard for the needs of both parties and for any other parties that that might ensue from the relationship, so the children or whoever. So the book's instructions are very, very clear. There's no ambiguity about the instructions. If somebody tells you you can interpret it in this way or that way, they're talking nonsense. This book is very straightforward. There's no subject to interpretation with 95% of the book. Maybe 5% we can talk about and say, what does this mean? Maybe this, maybe that. But if you take this book, you take ancient Arabic dictionaries and you take ancient Arabic poetry and words and historical stories, etc., you can quickly, in fact, in the book itself, you will find it very, very self-explanatory. So let's look at how the book then offers a counter to this fear-mongering that we're experiencing. Let me go back to this. The first level of fear that we spoke about is the fear of imminent danger, of physical fear. How does the Quran structure or view the problem of physical danger, fear, death, dying, injury, crime, etc.? How does the Quran allay those fears? First of all, it says that life and death are the province of God, of Allah. And so you don't have to, you can take that off the table. The day of your death and the day of your birth and the day and how much that is written, that is there. You don't have to bother with that. That's not a variable you need to be concerned with, because that is not of your making. But what it does actually put you in charge of is certain other related variables, like, for example, defending yourself, defending your community, taking precautions for your own health and for the well-being of your community. It allows physical or armed defense. It doesn't leave that to the state. It gives the right of self-defense to every citizen, armed self-defense. So first of all, in terms of the physical dangers and risks we face, the Quran offers us the right to defend ourselves. And if somebody wants to call you a vigilante or wants to call you a mob justice enforcer, so be it. Quran gives each human being the right to protect and preserve his own or her own life and the life of his near and dear ones and of his or her community. So that's at a very physical level. Then it makes compulsory the confrontation of a corrupt and evil system that is imposing poverty. I'm not going to go through all the verses, but let me just quickly go to some of the verses that will explain what I've just said now. Look at this verse. So they, the believers, should fight in the cause of Allah for the promotion of good and human dignity, who sell the life of this world for the year after, and whoso fights in the way of Allah, whether he himself gets slain or wins victory, in both cases, we shall bless him with a great reward. That's the directive of the Holy Book. The directive of the Holy Book is that there are things that are worse than death. There are things that are worse than injury, and those things are to be robbed, to be oppressed, to be downtrodden, to be enslaved, And the book clearly says, give your life, but never give your freedom. Let's look at some more verses that give directives in terms of the very physical fear that people feel. Look at this one. O believers, speaking now to those who affirm the Quran, what is the matter with you that when you are asked to set out to fight in the way of Allah, you, weighing heavy, bend towards the material and ignoble world of the earth? Are you pleased with the life of this world rather than the year after? So the property and belongings of this life, of the life of this world, are worthless in comparison with the year after and carry but little value. Let me explain to you that the perspective here that the Quran is giving is that losing your life is not so bad. Getting injured and losing your life is not that bad. There are worse things. It's not the worst possible thing. Remember, they're telling us in the West, or in Western society, that rather succumb to the criminal because your life is more important. The Quran here says no. Your life is less important than the enslavement of society. Rather give your life so that the rest of society will prevent enslavement. Because what the Quran does is it actually sets up a transcendental reality. The world here is not the only world that we as believers of the Quran embrace. We embrace this world, and we embrace a higher world that is a world to come. And so dying in this world is not the end. Another verse here. We're dealing with the fear of physical harm, leveraged by the system, by oppressive regimes, by the global elite, by the gangster, by the criminal around the corner. It says here, should you be killed or die, you should realize that Allah's consequent forgiveness and blessings outweigh anything they could accumulate in battle. Nothing that you can safeguard on this earth is worth more than the benefit of dying in the cause of truth and righteousness, in defending freedom. Let's look at this one. Note this, you who affirm truth. Do not imitate the rejectors who say to their brethren on reconnaissance or fighting missions, if they had stayed behind with us, they would not have died or been killed. Allah made that kind of talk demoralizing to him, realizing that Allah gives and takes life, and Allah is fully observant of all your doings. This particular directive is saying that to go and be afraid of dying when confronting the oppressor is to demoralize yourself. It is to surrender to the oppressor. And the talk of the coward is always, if you didn't fight, you wouldn't have died. Or if you didn't fight, nobody would have died. So the coward wants to live to be a slave. The Holy Book says that is not an option. We can't live in order to become a slave. More on this tone. This one says, Satan raises for you the prospect of poverty to incite you towards corruption. Allah raises for you the prospect of remediation and the benefit that comes with it. So then, Allah is the knowledge holder that is all encompassing. Again here, the fear of poverty, the fear of physical harm leads you towards becoming corrupted, part of the system. More. Right, so I think we're going to move to the next. So what I've covered now is how the Quran shapes your perspective. How this book shapes your perspective in terms of freedom or death, liberty or death. And the book clearly says that a life of slavery is not a worthy life. Prefer death rather than slavery. And once the criminal or the oppressor or the global elite catches wind that you are embracing that radical new attitude, they are disarmed. They are immediately disarmed. The criminal and the oppressor doesn't want to kill all people. They just want to put the fear of death in you. And if you lose the fear of death, you've basically disarmed him. Let's look at freedom from want, because that is the second level of fear that I mentioned to you, that I think that I can discern in our society. If you are not living in squalor, in a very poor, miserable conditions, shack fires and floods and murders and rapes, if you're living in a reasonably middle class environment where the suburb is clean and the cars are, prestigious cars and houses, then the type of fear that these people experience, my neighbors and the people I know around here, is mostly the fear of losing their job, or losing their health, or losing their ability to work, or that type of fear. It's the fear of loss. And so they become fixated on their own health or their own jobs, and they become super committed to their employers, because the employer guarantees, that they have a life. So what does the Quran say? What does the Quran say? The Quran again recontextualizes and offers you, the agent, the adopter, a different perspective on this question, so that fear, it tries to evaporate that fear. And how does it do that? First of all, the Quran very, very clearly states that wealth, provision, health, and life all come from Allah. It again takes that variable and says that that is a variable that you have no control over. You don't have control over the wealth. In the Quran, it uses the word rizq. You don't have control over that. That is written for you. Your health, that is written for you. Your death, that is written for you. What is in your domain? That doesn't mean there's nothing, because we are humans. We have agency. We do have agency. Agency means we have option. We have choice. We have a way of choosing. But the agency we have is around healthy living. It's around hard work. It's around social responsibility, being charitable and decent to your fellow people. It's around moral decency. And those are the areas that the Quran burdens you with. So you don't have to worry about when you'll die, but you have to worry about living a healthy life, living an upright life, making sure that your neighbor is not, suffering, working hard, being dedicated in your job, doing well in your job, being fair and honest in your business. Those are the things that you are required to exercise your own discretion on. And the Quran gives very clear guidelines to that. Let's look at a few verses that illustrate those points that I've just made. This verse says, "Declare then, Allah, holder of all dominion, you award authority to whom you please, and you remove authority from whom you please. You raise in glory whom you please, and you humble whom you please. All good comes from you, and for certain you have power over everything." Remember I said that we can exclude the wealth, provision, health, life, and that type of thing. Those things are not in your hands. It's in the hands of Allah. Also here, look at this verse. "For Allah is He who gives all sustenance, Lord of power, steadfast forever." Your sustenance is in God's hands. Another verse here, another directive from the Quran. You pass night into day, you pass day into night. You render life from the lifeless, and you render lifeless that which had life. You sustain whom you please, with no account to any. Like I said, life is the province of Allah, of God. Death is the province of God, giving life, giving death, and sustenance. But now the second point I made was that living a healthy life, working hard, seeking your livelihood, making effort, and being socially responsible, and being morally upright in society, that is where the responsibility falls on you. So you, and this is illustrated by one verse, for example, this verse 195. Let not your own hands contribute to your destruction. Right? So you cannot be a junkie on destructive stuff, like, that you eat and that you inhale and that you drink, and then blame God or Allah for being sick, or breathing chemicals, or polluted cities, etc. You need to fight that type of pollution. Here's another verse. And eat and drink, but commit not excess. God loves not the committers of excess. Again, coming back to the point that life and death and your rizq or sustenance, those are all in God's hands. But the effort, the healthy lifestyle, the healthy habits, that is in your control. Those who affirm the transcendental institute adherence and are charitable with what we provide to them. Right? Let me just move quickly. Next point. Right, so we've covered two now. We've covered freedom from physical fear, that the Quran offers that, because it says, don't be afraid of death. It's a better option than living as a slave. The second point, I said freedom from want. Don't be afraid of losing your income. It is guaranteed for you. You just have to make the effort, and you can try it out. I don't think nobody's ever tried it. My brother once told me, my eldest brother, he once told me he gave me a beautiful illustration. He said to me, you know what, look at the birds outside. They don't go to bed hungry at night. Every bird goes to bed into his nest with a full stomach. And where did he get his sustenance? In nature. And so too with all human beings. Nature has been created for us for sustenance. Earning our keep for the day is a natural reality of the natural world. And to have a job and to please a master and to please the government and those are not natural elements of nature. So I've done the first two levels of fear. Now I'm going to go to freedom from ignorance, because that's a very big type of fear also. Let me show you some of the verses that speak about that. There's one verse here that says, our Lord and Protector, raise us from their ranks, an agent from their midst, will proclaim to them your signs and instruct them in the code and in wisdom, while refining them. Indeed, you are mighty and wise. The book is promoting education, enlightenment, and civilization, and the banishment of ignorance in this verse. But there are more. Look at this one. He is the one who sent a glorious messenger among the illiterate people from amongst themselves, who recites to them his revelations and cleanses and purifies them and teaches them the book and wisdom. Indeed, they were in open error before. Again, what is the idea that is conveyed? Is that knowledge is a liberatory force. I'll move on to the fourth level of fear that the Quran counters, and that is freedom from feeling insignificant. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the problem with society today is that people are made to feel insignificant. You know, the atheist movement, the neo religious movements, they all preach a nihilistic world where nobody cares. You are on your own, and when you die, it's all over. That's what Richard Dawkins argues. He says, you know, that the insignificant of humanity. And naturally, it creates anxiety. It's a form of anxiety. I've mentioned it too early. If you give a man absolutely no cause for celebration, if you rip the identity away from every human being, what are you left with? You are left with a nervous, you know, blob of protoplasm, a troublesome blob of protoplasm, and that is exactly the identity victim movement that we witness in Western societies, where people, the blobs of plasma or protoplasm that they are, have found in their victim status a reason for existence. Is that if I'm to exist, let me exist as a black victim. Or if I'm to exist, let me exist as a Muslim victim, or as a gay victim, you know, as a vegetarian victim. And so victimhood is a means of coping. It's a means of having some sort of identity. But the Quran rejects that kind of false identity. You know, we cannot be reduced to such a one-dimensional identity. What does the Quran say? It says here, "And we have indeed honored the children of Adam and provided them with means of transport over the land and in the sea, and bestowed upon them sustenance out of clean and pure things, and we have exalted them above most of our creation by conferring on them superiority." You know, the book says here that don't drop that idea of being a victim, of being, you know, you're not a victim, you are a soldier. You know, if I'm to be something, then I'm a soldier against the corrupt system. I refuse to be a victim. But what the Quran is saying here is that you have a great and noble mission as the overlord of creation under God. You have the responsibility to marshal all the resources and all the means at your disposal to create a perfect society and a perfect universe, or to structure the universe and society in the most perfect way. And that is the mission that we have, to excel and to use our ingenuity to create the most magnificent environment that we can. Not to become victims and sad, you know, crybabies, etc. What I've tried to convey to you today is that we live in a time when fear is harnessed by the elite, by the oppressor class, to get you and me to toe the line. You know, otherwise, first of all, we lose our income, we drop down into the level of squalor that we see in poor areas. So the biggest fear that the American citizen or the European citizen has is that the country will go third world, will become a miserable place, will become, as Donald Trump calls it, a shithole. And so they will toe the line, they will do whatever they can to preserve their current position. So all that is harnessed by the global elite and by the local elites to keep you in check and to keep you towing the line. I'm offering what the Quran is offering me, and I'm sharing it with you. The Quran is offering a completely different outlook. It says that life is not worth living if it's not a life of freedom. So in other words, the Quran calls on you and me to go into battle against the oppressor. Number two, the Quran says that do not fear the loss of sustenance, because that is written for you. And you will not lose it. It's not up to the oppressors to feed you. You will feed yourself. Don't fear your loss of life, because even if you do lose it, and they will never let all people lose their lives. So some of us will lose our lives. But even if some of us lose our lives, it says that the benefits will be many, many times more worth than the loss of my life. And then the fear of ignorance, it says that knowledge, real knowledge, not knowledge that is tied to serving the master, but real knowledge is compulsory, and there should be the proliferation of knowledge in society, and knowledge will empower. And then lastly, the point I made was that the problem of loss of identity, loss of relevance, loss of significance is effectively addressed in the Quran, where it says that you are the representative of God in this universe, and you are here to make good on that position. You are here to structure this universe, to structure this earth, to structure the society, and to create the most perfect and ideal society that you can. Thank you very much for listening. If you don't mind, I would appreciate if you could subscribe, and if you can click the bell icon so that you will know when another video comes out. Thank you.